Hi, everybody. Welcome to XS Exceed. This is Gearface, resident scrubby Exceed player, here again with an expert that I've promised fame and riches to in order to teach me a new Exceed character. This time I'm sitting down again with Rose to learn about Enchantress. And I'm very excited about Enchantress because I don't know anything about Enchantress, and I'm coming in with a completely blank slate, except for the fact that I've seen her kit before and didn't understand it, which is a great place to be. Rose, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Quick disclaimer before we get started. As always, first of all, we are playing to win in this guide. That doesn't have to be how you play Exceed. Exceed can be fun. Shocker, right? But we are going to be discussing how to play in a competitive mindset. If that's not interesting to you, please do play the way that is interesting to you. Likewise, the strategy that we're going to be talking about, just for efficiency's sake, is going to be talked about in kind of absolute terms. We're going to say things like always do this, never do this, probably always do this. This is always correct, stuff like that. These are the rules to Rose's strategy on Enchantress. They don't have to be yours. And in fact, we encourage you to develop your own line of play with this as a base, and then come back and tell us why we're wrong. And then I'll promise you fame and riches to come on my show and run an addendum to Enchantress. But yeah, with all that said, Rose, tell me about Enchantress.
All right. And yep, everything you just said, agree with. Very important. I think this is a particularly good character to come back and tell us what you found, because I think this character is really deep.
Hmm. And also maybe a little bit, just from my kind of cursory survey of some tournament results, maybe kind of underdeveloped. It seems like
Yes.
it seems like Enchantress is not a character who has seen a ton of play at top level, and is sort of an off meta pick in general. So definitely maybe some room to dig a bit deeper on her and see what there is to find.
Yep. So let's talk about Enchantress, and let's start with the character ability, because like most Succeed characters, very important to her kit.
Yeah.
Enchantress says, don't draw cards at the end of your turn. Instead, you draw a hand of 6 cards, you empty it, and you draw a hand of 6 cards.
Okay.
So
Already I'm confused. Like that is already a major a major change from how characters tend to play. So tell me about this ability.
Um, so this gives you really, really, really free force costs, because you actually want to spend force some of the time when your hand is small. It's like, I could spend 1 force and move 1, and I'll have 1 card left in my hand, and I won't draw a new hand. So really, I should spend 2 force and move 2, and draw a
Right.
completely fresh hand.
Got it. Okay.
And it's also pretty limiting. This is on Frontside at least, is going to be a huge contributor to like the flow of your game plan, because you need to look at your hand, you need to say, here's what I do with this hand, here's how I get to 0 without being in a bad situation because I have misplanned and ended up with 2 cards in my hand and neither of them do anything for me.
Right.
Because you can't
You're
just
you're looking to reduce your hand size down to 0 to get a new one, and then you play the hand you get, and then you reduce it down, you play the hand you get. That kind of
Yep.
flow.
Yes, you can take the prepare action if you want, but that's kind of a taunt, because unlike every other character, your prepare draws. Well, like every other character, your prepare draws 1 card, but then you don't draw at the end of turn.
Right. And same for like a change cards action.
Yep.
You're not actually going positive on resources in that case because you're just cycling out cards and not getting one for end of turn.
Yep.
Gotcha. Interesting.
So I'll go into more depth in Frontside like right after this, but let's look at the Exceed ability.
Right.
The Exceed ability has this big kicker. You're just going to shuffle basically every card you own except what's left in your gauge after paying Exceed back into your deck.
Okay.
And then when you draw at the end of turn, you can instead draw up to 7 cards. You may. The turn you Exceed, you'll want to, because otherwise you'll have 1 card in your hand.
Right.
Um,
And this reshuffle doesn't count toward the reshuffle action, I assume, right? That is a separate thing for Enchantress. She basically gets like 3 decks.
Yes,
Okay,
which so Enchantress games go to deck out more often than other ones do because Enchantress, in theory, has the deck pressure. In
right,
practice, Enchantress may be the one who decks out because you're spending a bunch of force for all your effects.
right,
So even though you have an extra deck, you might just burn through it if you're too careless.
right. Okay. I'm also noticing um, that this exceed effect is not a strict upgrade. Like it's not this and you have +1 power or something like that. Like this is a differently worded, differently formatted effect that that seems like it has slightly different use cases than Frontside.
Yep, exactly. That's one of the things I find most interesting about this character is that you can exceed and you will. It is an upside for sure. It is an upgrade, but it makes you better at some things and worse at others.
Okay.
So,
D-
yes,
d-
both
does
Frontside. Oh,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Does pretty much every because I know from like season 2 characters, for example, some of them like they just don't exceed, right? Sometimes, or when we were talking about Dan earlier on a previous guide, Dan just probably doesn't use his exceed side. Is Enchantress is it doable to win with just one side of her, or is her exceed side kind of what you're gunning for, or maybe just the reshuffle on the exceed side is what you're gunning for?
I would exceed every Enchantress game. If I can't exceed, it's probably because I can't get up to 4 gauge because I'm getting beaten up.
Okay.
Um, the the thing that is interesting is timing the exceed, though, which again I'll talk about. Or no, here's a good time as any. Timing the exceed is really important because again you have this free shuffle, and again you're going to possibly deck yourself out if you're too careless with your force expenditure. So you want to get value out of that.
Right.
And also, this Exceed is a get out of jail free card on Frontside. You are trying to play this mini game of looking at your hand. How do I empty this hand without putting myself in a bad situation? And if you do put yourself in a bad situation, depending on what's in your hand, you might not have a better option to get out of it than just getting hit.
Right.
If you get up to 4 gauge, though, if you can take an action, your action is always you always have the choice to draw a new hand.
Right.
So this is both a reshuffle and a change cards, as well as an exceed,
Right.
all in one.
Yeah, so it's oddly high tempo for what is normally a downtime for this kind of character, where you're taking time off from whatever you're doing to do something else. But this you're taking time off to do like 3 other things.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, and both frontside and backside, they both have this kind of idea of you have very free force costs. They do it in slightly different ways, but on both sides of this character, your force economy is very easy.
Yeah.
Which is good because your attacks don't do damage.
Okay.
Here are your highest damage specials at 4.
Ooh.
Here's
Okay.
your lowest damage special at 2.
Right. Yeah, and 3 for the other one. All right. So compare that again. We just got done talking about Dan a little while ago, where we're talking about hitting for 7 with him like it's no big deal. This is you're regularly hitting for maybe a little over half of that.
Yep.
So you're not a high damage character, but you can play resources effectively infinitely until you are legitimately out of everything, not just out of your hand, like out of everything.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
You do have your gauge economy does matter because as we just talked about, this 4 gauge exceed, that's quite high, though you have some ways to make gauge reliable, like attack shapes that will hit. One of your attacks gets you an extra gauge. And you want to play your altars because these are your damage.
Right. Sure.
This is 6. And
And this is a lot. Wow. If you have a lot of cards in hand, that's a huge amount of damage.
Yeah, so we're kind of getting into how do you convert this pile of low damage attacks? A lot of them are kind of janky too at that. This pile of low damage attacks and this free economy into winning. And that is a couple of different ways, a lot of different ways. And some of them are better on front side and some of them are better on backside.
Okay.
On both sides, you've got tempo, especially front side, because on front side, if you can just keep finding strikes, you can just keep striking forever.
Right, because you're reducing your hand size and you're getting a free draw. You never have to take the prepare action really. You never have to unless you can't empty your hand for some reason, but ideally you're just dropping,
Yep.
dropping, 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 and now you have it again.
Yes.
Okay.
Enchantress does lots of really high tempo actions. And Enchantress, this is risky because again, you can deck yourself. Your force that you're paying is your deck's force, not your hand's force. But Enchantress can just say, okay, I'm going to take the move action. I want to be here.
Right, I can just leave.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so I want to come back to what you just said in a second here about this is your deck's force, not your hand's force. Because when you're talking about economy, there are parts of it that are sensitive. There's gauge that's sensitive, there's deck that's sensitive, but my hand is something that I should just be spending kind of as much as I can of. Is that true?
Pretty much. As much as you can of, if that doesn't put you in an awkward spot.
Okay.
Like at the rate that will get you a new hand when you need it and not after.
Right.
So aside from just having this tempo of being able to spend a bunch of force the opponent to do the same, being able to strike and then draw 6 cards during your strike, you have zoning. You've got 3 varying levels of good special projectiles. You have a special that might say advance 6 on it,
Right.
so gets you out of the corner, and you have 2 altars that are both very long ranged.
Yeah, from just looking at the kit alone without any other sort of idea about how this character would play, my guess would be a much lower tempo zoner character. But this force boost and I guess kind of the lowish quality of the attacks themselves lend themselves towards a much more rushdown oriented playstyle than I would think from just looking at the kit.
Um, yes. So that's one way that you win, is you can zone. Or sorry. Yes. And that's kind of interesting because as we get to the backside of Enchantress, you still have this high tempo ability. You still have the ability to draw a bunch of cards, but you're no longer as forced to rely on it. You no longer have to say, I need to empty my hand to draw a new hand and not be caught high and dry.
Right. So
Instead,
Frontside is kind of a liability and an advantage in a lot of ways.
yes.
Right. Okay. Sorry. Continue. Not to interrupt.
No, that's great. That is pretty much exactly what I was going to say. Backside is also a liability and an advantage, but in a much smaller way. You are very vulnerable to reading. You will always be
Hmm.
pretty vulnerable to reading. You do have some control over that because you can just spend normals as force. You have force costs. You're going to draw new force to replace them.
Why? Yeah. Why
But
not get rid of the things that make you vulnerable? Sure.
but you will sometimes just be drawing like 5 cards, and there's a limit to how much you can stop being read on
Right.
the turn after you've drawn 5 cards.
Right. Before we keep going, something that you said I wouldn't have caught on to without this lesson. I don't think you said that you draw cards by striking, and on front side at least, and that's because you are. If the last
Yeah,
card in my hand is a strike, that is how I'm getting my new 6. So that's actually like completely opposite
yes,
every
that's
other
the biggest
character.
difference. That is
Yeah.
probably the biggest relative advantage of Frontside as well, is that, look at this trigger. At the end of your turn or during cleanup, draw until 6 cards.
Oh.
At the
Okay.
end of your turn, draw until 7 cards. So on
Gotcha.
backside, strikes don't draw you a new hand. On frontside, strikes can draw you a new hand if you go down to 0.
Okay. Interesting. And that's also countered to basically every other character in the game where striking is the hand size negative action you can take.
Action. Yeah.
This is in most cases, I mean for 5 of the 6 cards or whatever in your hand, that is hand size negative, but then that last strike you suddenly just get a refill for free. And for free as in like no action cost. That's just what you got from striking.
Yes, absolutely.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
Um, so back to how you win as Enchantress.
Yes.
Tempo, zoning. Also, your deck is full of slows. You have another focus, a slow projectile, a pretty fast range 1 to 4 sweep with low damage, a range 1 to yes sweep once you've exceeded.
Right.
So if you just play enough slows, you can win by playing a lot of slows. Slows are strong.
Yeah.
And again, since you reshuffle your deck, if you are really in a weird game, you can just hit them with sweep 5 times instead of the normal upper limit of 4.
Right. So you have quite a bit of guard and a surprising amount of armor on your cards in a lot of cases. You have I imagine that you can block hard as Enchantress. That
Yep.
that because you have so much force to spend. So you're surprisingly tanky too.
Yes, you are. You have quite a bit of guard in your kit. Like you're saying, as you were talking about, so striking is hand negative sometimes and positive others. It's not like 1 turn out of 6 you're drawing up to 6. It's like, okay, I'm going to play Flying Charge and spend free force. I'm going to play Spiral Orb and discard 3 cards. I'm going to play Block and empty my hand.
Right.
So maybe every other strike, every third strike, you could draw a new hand.
Right. Okay. And in the meantime, the cards you're not playing as that strike are hopefully going towards making that strike better, or
Yep.
maybe setting up the situation so that you can play the strike that you want to play. That makes sense.
Yep. So other things that make you win. Sort of. We're getting into the things. It started with tempo, which is a little bit more on Frontside's favor. We're getting into things that are a little more on Backside's favor now. EXs. You are a character that draws a lot of cards. Even on Frontside, you can draw an EX, but it's weird, right? Most characters, if you want an EX, you can hold the card in your hand until you see the second copy.
Sure.
In Frontside Enchantress, your EXs are deck order. You will draw a lot of cards. If you have EXs, you will see them very quickly, but you don't have control over whether you have them.
Right, and you're incentivized to play them because that's 2 cards down instead of 1 from your strike, for example.
Yep, and valuable damage and armor.
And they're good, right? They're not just more force expenditure. They're also EX attacks, notably quite strong.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So on backside, all the same upside of drawing a bunch of cards, but now you can actually hold the EX you want as well. So
right. Okay.
Best of both worlds. Set play. You are a season 1 through 5 character. Your boosts are not good at set play, but you have an extra copy of Light, you have an extra copy of Fierce, you have an extra copy of Tech, Parry, Reading, because you have just an extra run through of your deck.
Oh, for the reshuffle. Okay, sure. Yeah, it's not in the cards. It's just that you play them again.
Yep. You just get to use all your best tools one more time than anyone else.
Okay, so really,
whatever the tools in the matchup are.
Extra copy of both because they're two copies in every deck. You reshuffle, so you're playing Light 6 times a game if you really really want to.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And the last thing you do to win is you play your Ultras. Your Ultras are... These are going to cost you 7 gauge because you need to be on backside for these to be reasonable cards.
Okay.
But once you are on backside, these are just lots of damage, very reliable.
Okay.
So
with I know that she kind of has awkward attacks that we'll get into in a second that might impact what I'm about to ask you. But from what I'm hearing, really, really incredible movement abilities, not from a card effect, but just from being able to leave from spending force, and access to a lot of boosts through sort of the kind of strange recursion she has with the reshuffle. Does this make her neutral? Just like can she just kind of stand wherever she wants and be at whatever range she wants and have the card she wants, or is this deck order thing keeping her from doing that?
On front side, for sure, the deck order thing is keeping her from doing that. On backside, it's more of you don't have the density of boosts, and the thing about the normal boosts is they cost 0 force. So on backside, you do get to draw at your end of turn now, but you're only going to draw 1 new card.
Right.
So you need to spend force to see your neutral options, and
I see.
Using your good neutral options does not spend force.
Right. So you're not necessarily like having greater access to the same number of okay neutral tools as everybody else doesn't make you a neutral god. Having access to really good neutral tools makes you a neutral god.
Yes.
Okay, and she doesn't really have that.
Yes, absolutely. She just If someone has Way of the Warrior, you can tech it every time with an asterisk, which is on Frontside. This is one of the other downsides of Frontside. On Frontside, you better hope you drew your tech in the hand that they played Way of the Warrior.
Right. You just don't have it otherwise, and you can't hold it either.
Yes.
Got it.
So the early, yeah, once there are two main timings you want to exceed. With variation per, like, I really want to threaten my altars, I really want to get a new hand. You want to exceed at the end of one of your shuffles, and if you have the choice, it would be the first one.
Okay.
Because that will get you 2 shuffles with your backside, which will actually get you pretty good neutral.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, that makes sense. So sorry, you mentioned 2 times. Is the other time just at the end of the second reshuffle, or is there
yes,
another time?
yeah. I mean, that was the time I meant. There's also just an argument that was just like, I really want to be on Exceed side in this matchup. I'll Exceed the second I get a chance to. I'm not going to wait.
That makes sense.
Yes.
But for value purposes, if you've managed to get 4 gauge from your first 4 strikes and you still have a huge amount of cards left somehow, you're wasting a lot of the ability of that Exceed by flipping right away.
Yeah, you're throwing away a lot of your force over the course of the entire game. You're throwing away.
Right.
Well, if you got 4 gauge out of 4 strikes, you're probably doing pretty good on tempo, so you might as well ride it a bit longer, etc.
Right, so, that makes sense. Okay.
And lastly, your Wild Swings. They're funny. You have 3 force specials. I think this ties you for the most in the game with Hazama, and I don't know who else. So you have a lot of control over what you Wild Swing compared to most characters.
Right.
The issue is your shapes are still, like, this doesn't actually help you that much.
Yeah, so we got 2 to 5, we've got 3 to 6, so there's some overlap there. We've got 1 to 3, so there's a very minor amount of overlap there, just among the force specials. We got
consider this one to just miss if you Wild Swing it.
Yeah. Flying Charge, at least you have control over the range band, and then your ultras. So yeah, you really aren't there. It's you can't stand at a range and just let cards rip and know they're going to hit.
That's not going to happen.
Gotcha.
Your Wild Swings they're funny because you can invalidate a lot. You're going to have situations happen where you're like, okay, this doesn't hit, I invalidate it. This doesn't hit, I invalidate it. This doesn't hit, I invalidate it. Oh, I lose anyway.
Right? Yeah. Now I've pulled, dive into my opponent's assault or something like that. Darn it.
Yep.
Right.
So cool. So what's the general game plan? Again, play Frontside because you have to. Look for your good Exceed timing. You've got some pretty annoying threats Frontside. That's one of the other relative value points of Frontside, which we'll talk about when I start going over cards. But some of your cards are a lot more threatening Frontside than they are backside, and your opponent will have to deal with you just plopping a card on the table and saying, what are you going to do about this?
Interesting. And you're not saying that they have more value to what Frontside wants to do. You're saying that, like, in absolute terms, they are more threatening than when you're on Frontside.
Yeah, like this was a good example. This card that if you Wild Swing it, you miss.
Right.
On Frontside, you will have a hand that varies between 1 and 6 cards. So after playing a strike, this will be ranged between 0, useless, and 5.
Okay, so things that have hand size checks on backside are almost always 6 or 7 because that's what you drew up to.
Yes.
Oh.
So on Frontside, this is actually quite a good title whirl if you are managing your hand properly. This is like literally title whirl if you have 4 cards in your hand, including this. You play it, it hits range 3 at speed 6, it pushes so it beats sweep.
Title whirl being an above curve option at 3 that also pushes, correct?
Most title whirls do not push, but the original, or I hope it's the original, I don't know, season 1. This title whirl, a very good title whirl, beats sweep.
Gotcha. Okay.
And this is kind of similar. In a really weird way, right? Because you're Enchantress. You don't get to have straightforward tools. You have to have weird tools.
Of course. So, but the 3/6 at range 3 is kind of the whirl shape.
Yep.
And then on top of that, you get whatever else weirdness that she has, including this push effect. But you're saying that because of the Enchantress's Exceed side, and we'll get into this.
Once you Exceed, this attack doesn't exist. Once you Exceed, this will probably never hit.
Interesting. Okay. No, that makes sense. I wouldn't have thought of it, but that makes perfect sense. Okay.
So, yeah, that's one of your annoying threats Frontside. Um, so again, look for your timing. You want to get value out of the free shuffle. You hopefully get value. I mean, if you're just managing your hand perfectly and you never get caught in an awkward hand, this doesn't matter, but it's nice to have a get out of jail card as well.
Right, definitely.
And then once you get to backside, your ultras become live because, again, you need the cards in hand for this to deal damage. You need the cards in hand for this to be super reliable.
Right. So either you had 3 gauge, you were in the perfect situation on front side. You were in the perfect situation. You just drew up the 6 cards. It's time to go right now with this attack. Or you have just a lot more cards in hand on backside, and you're much more likely to be able to play them.
Yep.
Okay, that makes
So
sense.
on backside, you have your ultras, you have the more reliable set play. You can slow down on backside, and you can just play for value.
Okay, and the ultras that you mentioned, you said were also kind of your big source of damage. So that is
Yeah,
you're
that's one of the main reasons you want to exceed, is
right.
where are you getting your damage from? You want to play these ultras eventually so you can actually win the game.
Okay, that makes sense. Gotcha.
Especially this one, which we'll get into. So, what's good about Frontside? As we were talking about earlier, ending a strike at 0 draws you new cards. That's a really big deal.
Right.
Your blocks are really good. You have other tools in your deck that say empty your hand during a strike. You have a bunch of force specials that will take cards out of your hand during a strike. So being able to draw, if you don't like your hand and you can empty your hand, you don't have to like your hand anymore because you have a new hand.
Right. And you're kind of playing this mini game where you're trying to reduce it down in a way that gets you to 0 while also getting as much value out of it as you can.
Yep.
Okay.
You have access to the succeed action, which is, again, pretty nice. Once you are exceeded, it's actually a little awkward sometimes to get cards out of your hand if you, say, are standing where you want to be. You could change cards, but that feels really wasteful because, like, you could have just spent that force and you would draw the cards anyway.
Right.
So being able to do this big CC, better CC because all your options are now up,
And you're
is pretty
exceeding
cool.
at the same time.
Yep.
Okay. And when you do exceed, like you mentioned, one requirement of the timing is do your best to have it at the end of a deck so that you can reshuffle for as much value as you can. If I have an
Yeah.
amazing hand of cards on front side and it's time for me to exceed, should I delay it by a couple of turns because I really want to play those cards? And
Yeah, probably. Like,
okay.
yeah. If you have good plays, make them.
Okay.
When I say the end of your deck, notably, like, this is Exceed, where 6 out of the 7, or 5 out of the 7 seasons have reading. Pretend I'm talking about Anji, I guess, when I said 6.
Right.
You can't, and also just your options get more limited. You can't draw to the exact last card in your deck and then Exceed. You probably want to Exceed with, like, one hand left
Right.
in your deck.
Yeah, 5 to 10 cards probably to keep some ambiguity
Yep.
about what's in your hand so that you aren't completely vulnerable at that moment. But in terms of hand size, when I'm exceeding, I could pitch 6 cards into my newly free reshuffled deck when I exceed, or I could pitch 1 because I only have 1 card left in my hand, right?
Yep, you're going to lose your hand either way, so you might as well get, if it's a good hand, get value out of it first.
Okay, so ideal time to exceed is like I have 1 card in hand, I have 5 cards in my deck, uh, and I'm ready to make the shift over.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
So let me put these to the side for a moment. So yeah, front side.
Move
Those are your
title
relative
as well.
advantages. Oh yeah, you can just get rid of that.
That's all good.
Really. Front side, you're going to be doing this minigame. So let's talk about this minigame.
Okay.
It's turn 1. This is my hand. What the heck do I do with this?
So flying charge, shattering scream, spike, another copy of shattering scream. Okay. Two
This one,
spikes. Sorry.
yes, 2 spikes. This one's exciting, to be entirely honest. So I'm gonna mulligan this hand is what I'm gonna do with this hand because this is turn 1 and I can. I'm cheating.
Okay.
Let's just draw a fresh hand. So, turn 1, fresh hand. Wow, how did I do that?
Whoa,
Okay.
yeah, that was an impressive amount of tabletop simulator goofiness. So magic shot, homing orb, spiral orb, cross assault. Okay.
Um, and this hand's one of the nice easy ones. Okay, we're turn 1. We're going to play Homing Orb. This is your new grasp as well, by the way.
New as in NU, like new 13.
Yes.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yep. Range 4. This is just an unbeatable option turn 1 if you're player 1 for almost every matchup.
Right.
They're going to block or focus, and you'll just have to deal with that, but they're not going to hit you back.
Right. Okay.
And then your Enchantress, you just pushed them to range 5. They probably want to come back in. Cool. I'll just play Spiral Orb. Draw a new hand.
Draw or discard up to 2 cards after you may draw or discard a card. Okay. So yeah, I gotta. The idea that I'm discarding cards on purpose is already so weird to me that I'm still trying to get in that mindset. So, all right, and then you're just like, well, these 3 cards aren't doing anything for me at this exact moment, so we'll just spend them.
Yep, let's get a new hand already.
Wild.
Pretty much.
Okay.
So it is very fast. That's
It took two turns
strikes.
to get to finish that up, and the first one was just a easy. You're at range 4 strike.
Yep, and this is notable in 2 ways. The first way, which is the point I was trying to make, your hand velocity is really fast.
Yeah.
This is your hand gone.
Right.
Here's the second point, the one that is kind of made by virtue of the hand I drew. This was a great play, because, again, get that free damage engaged while you can. And then I'm looking at my hand, and this is pretty awkward. I don't have any stat boosts. If my opponent went to range, like, I don't know, let's say they walked into range 3, I'm not going to initiate Cross. I could initiate Assault or Magic Shot, but then now I'm down to 2 cards in hand. This doesn't beat anything at range 3, really. So probably I play Assault, and now I have this weird hand. I can defend a Spiral Orb. You're going to have awkward hands, and you need to navigate how to get through them, which is why I did something just like Initiate with a slow. This isn't an ideal play. I'm not happy about just striking with the Spiral Orb. I'd rather defend with it because, it's kind of like a focus.
Right.
But I need a new hand. This hand is not going to get better by me sitting on it.
Right. Okay. And there's no point in holding these cards for long-term value because what am I holding them for? Nothing else is coming. I have these cards and that's it.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, maybe you could do something like I'm going to backstep, and then once they come up to me, I'll run, just get tricky, just waste their time a little.
Right, but you're advocating for basically like that is more turns that I'm at a card disadvantage when I do that. I'm playing 1 card, now I've got 3.
Yep.
Next turn I'm playing 1 card, now I've got 2.
My options are getting fewer. This hand is relatively okay for that line of play because I can just have Spiral Orb, I can mash Spiral Orb when they try to do something to me.
Right.
But if they just boost that, if I can't get to a range where they're not comfortable boosting stats and passing, they'll just boost stats and pass, and my options get worse and worse into that.
Right, and also it seems like a lot of your cards require force expenditures to even work in some cases.
Yes, this is one of the downsides of Frontside. Sometimes you'll have to spend gauge because you need that to make your card work, and you don't want to spend gauge. You'd rather spend your free force.
Right.
The most notable one of that is going to be, where did I put my reference? Oh, here we go. My Flying Charge. Because this is a pretty good card. This hits at range 1 to 4, and a lot of board states will dodge a slow counterattack.
Yeah.
However, X is the number of cards in your hand. If you are using this at range 3, it's going to be really hard to dodge a slow if you're spending cards out of your hand.
Right, because
you might want to spend force.
Some amount of that force is probably coming from your hand, which means that you're reducing your hand size, which means that the after doesn't push you or move you as far afterward.
Yeah.
Right.
So this might be a reason you have to spend gauge Frontside. Force costs. Just if you do get in a situation where Spiral Orb's the last card in your hand, and you probably need to play Spiral Orb, because if you Wild Swing, you're still in that situation next turn.
Right.
You might just have... Though you can boost past Spiral Orb, so it's not as bad. If Magic Shot is the last card in your hand, this boost does nothing with an empty hand.
Right.
You probably just need to pay that force cost for your gauge so you can get a new hand if you're not going to move action.
You can get something else. Okay.
So, yep.
So that's the mini game. Is I'm looking at this hand in terms of how do I get rid of it while getting value out of it, rather than how do I preserve it while getting value as I play it.
Yes,
Right.
that's the Frontside minigame. And
Okay.
that's pretty fun. That's something that most of Exceed doesn't get to do. Dan has a little bit of that with the how do I get to zero at the right point.
Right, for my
But
ultras. But this is a like fundamental to your game plan is how do I lose my options as quickly as I can.
yeah, or like again, in an order that I like. It might be that my hand is full of stat boosts and I don't mind going slow with that hand.
Right. Okay. Um but the hands that you drew were
We're the opposite. They were
yeah. They're things that, hey, these are great if more cards are coming and I'm trying to hold a cross for later on or something. But right now what I want is the ability to play my cards.
Yep.
Okay.
So now that we just kind of showed off the minigame a little, let's talk about cards. And
Yeah.
I have the normals here. I have the specials and ultras here. Talk about normals really fast because for the most part, Enchantress normals are normals. You have more copies of the boost in a long game, but otherwise, this is a normal dive, this is a normal assault, this is a normal cross, normal grasp, normal sweep, normal spike.
Okay.
These two are okay. These two and this boost are funky on Frontside. In particular, block says draw a new hand if you get hit. Notably, it doesn't matter if you get spiked, that lets you draw a new hand. If you get missed entirely, you don't get a new hand because you cannot spend because you were not hit.
So if I get spiked, I'm
You can
I'm
still spend for full armor. Nothing stops you, right?
and nothing will stop it won't stop the spike, but it will, and it won't go to gauge afterward, which sucks, but I'm getting rid of my hand one way or another.
Yep.
Okay.
So this is the Enchantress. The I'm gonna play block. You grasped me. Okay, discard 4 cards.
Discard everything. You deal negative negative 4 damage or whatever. Oh, and
Yep.
focus draws you a card.
Yes, this
And you
makes
don't
focus a lot worse front side because so Style Orb. I was talking about that hand. Like, oh, I'm okay going down to Style Orb as like the last card in my hand because I'll get a new hand and it's a slow and slows are safe. If
right.
focus is the last card in your hand, you're still in trouble next turn.
Right, because you draw a card. The thing that you want with every other character, one of the things that makes focus such a nice, like, easy value proposition. You're like, well, I've got I. That's so
But
weird.
yep. So those are the normal attacks that Enchantress makes weird. We already talked about tech. Tech is unreliable front side. This is a really big weakness.
Right.
If your opponent just boosts something and you don't have a good answer to it, you're going to continue not having a good answer to it.
Until I happen to draw it, and I can't save it. I can't wait around for I can't hold
Yeah,
my
you
dive for
can't.
later.
You. Yep.
Weird.
Yep.
And okay, so I'm assuming that, like, all right, focus is less valuable because it draws me a card. Clearly, the real Enchantress play, the stuff that they don't teach you about, is that the real play is to get hit by my opponent's sweep. Uh, to to make them
Sometimes it bails you out. Other times it messes up your plan. It's right.
okay.
It's a mixed blessing.
Yeah,
But yeah, sometimes getting hit by a sweep is great.
that's so funny.
So
All right.
that's Enchantress. Front side is very funny. Let's talk about specials.
Yeah.
We already kind of did a head start on this homing orb. This card is quite good front side. It's not consistent, but you can hold this threat over your opponent. They need to know if this hits them because if it does, it's probably dominant at the range.
Right. And this range check happens after
After
you
the
put
card
it
is played.
after the card is down, so it cannot hit for, or it cannot hit at range 7 almost ever.
Yeah, almost ever. Yep. It's
Okay.
on backside. It's probably range 6. On front
Right.
side,
It's
you would
range
really like it to be range 3 or 4. Those are the ranges this card is dominant at.
right where you're pushing sweep away, you're stopping assault, you're stopping dive.
Yep.
Okay.
And notably, as we saw in the hand on as player 1, this hits turn 1. As player 2, this does not hit turn 1. You need
Right.
EX.
Right. And so EXing it would reduce the hand size further and it would hit at a shorter range.
Yep.
That is
So
very weird.
EX homing orb as on defense is Enchantress. Like if your opponent knows the homing orb doesn't work when you're player 1, they might when you're player 2. That's when the EX homing orb is great because they might try to do something.
Right. That's it. That's exceptionally strange, but I like that. Like, I mean, it's a when you have it, it's a good card, right? You don't need to. There's not that many considerations about, like, Once you've read the card and parsed it correctly, now it's probably just good. There's situations where you can't play it ever because you have too many cards in your hand, but that's when you use it as force for another thing, right?
Yep. Another thing, like you do have again, you have boosts. If this is in a hand with grasp, that's a really or like yeah, fierce in particular. You can adjust your hand size just a little bit to keep the threat live. Like
Right,
if my
because
homing orb is one range too far, absolutely I'll boost fierce because homing orb probably wins if it
right,
hits.
and now it's your opponent's turn. If they strike into you, you have an above curve option, and you're
5
not.
damage now. Yep.
Yeah, and you're not drawing a card from playing the boost. That's not a card neutral option for Enchantress Frontside. Gotcha.
Yep. So you can adjust it. That's I think one of the defensively strong things you have is you can say to your opponent, "Do you think I have homing orb in this hand? How confident are you?"
Right.
The boost on it is weird. Here's probably where you want to use the boost. You're here. The opponent is. I'll grab like this. Opponent's here. Opponent may advance up to or retreat up to 2. If they move fewer than 2 spaces per sec, take 5 non-lethal damage. This says to your opponent, okay, I have to go here.
Right, pretty much. 5 is a lot.
Yep. I do think I have not seen this come up too often in games, but notably, this is non-lethal damage. If you are both at low life, your opponent might be smart enough to like say, "Oh, okay, I'll advance 1, and now I will strike you with an on-curve ignore armor, and now you are dead."
Right. Going back to homing orb briefly. So this is our opponent.
Yes.
If my opponent is here, right, and I have you know if I have 3 cards in my or 4 cards in my hand actually, they don't actually need to worry about homing orb in this position at all. They can just
Yes.
pretend that like that threat doesn't exist the same way that sweep doesn't exist at this range because I mean even then if I dive in sweep's still active. They know for sure just by counting the cards in my hand whether that's a live threat or not, unless I'm EXing it,
Wild
right?
swinging or
Or
EXing.
wild swinging. Okay, and I don't have any. It's not a force special, so I can't mitigate it that way. I don't have any like now strike boost. Oh, I do. Um.
You do. You even have one that lets you hit homing orb, but it's
Okay.
kind of
Okay.
yeah.
So
On
it
offense, you can do it. On defense, they know.
right, but it's possible that I can hold the threat over their head at certain ranges, but not on defense. Without an EX. Got it. Okay. So it has like slightly fuzzy positional range by being able to move it down 1 with an EX. That's it though.
Yeah. Or again, up one with a wild swing. They always have to be a little afraid of that.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
but
Okay.
you don't want wild swing too much as Enchantress because you'd rather have control over how you're going through your hand,
Right.
and you're not like you're going to be caught with an empty hand most of the time.
Sure. Sure.
Um, but yeah, it's not a threat that they don't know about, but like you're at this range, you have 4 cards in hand, so homing orb is range free. They know about it. They still have to find a way to beat it.
Definitely, yeah. Even if you don't have it, it's in their mind. But if they're here, they just have to. They just can
Yeah, they
pretend it
just
doesn't
they
exist until you move or until you draw more cards or something.
yep.
Okay.
Yeah, homing orb. You'll know if homing orb. When you draw homing orb, you'll probably have a pretty good idea if you're likely to hit with it that hand.
Right. Gotcha.
Because the smaller your hand gets, the less likely you are. Because once it's at range 2, it's no longer even that good of an option. It's just 3 and 4. 3 and 4 is the sweet spot.
Okay. Makes sense.
And 5, I suppose, but like if you're at 5, you're doing pretty well for yourself. You've got other options at 5.
Right.
So yes, this boost is weird. I think there is ways to get value out of it, but it's not something that you could just kind of look at and be like, okay, I'm going to boost this and get value. It's
Right.
weird. So this card is often an attack or its force.
Okay.
Fire Wave. Here is your super solid projectile, honestly. This is 4/4/4, 3 to 6. This card will just kind of work most of the time. It has an after push, which is really funny. You don't have to hit with this to push with it.
Interesting.
And it even has armor. This is just pretty reliable shape.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we would not be super surprised to see this shape without the guard or without the armor or without the push. Like one of those things. Like there's a lot. I guess that's why it's a force special. Like there's a lot on this card actually.
Yep. Yep. Um, And this boost is weird. You found, like, I think why you have this boost, which is these. You could use it frontside if you like really wanted to empty your hand after a strike, as well. Like discard down to exactly what I'm striking with and then strike.
Right. Okay. So that's another way. I think during the Dan lesson, I made the comparison that some of these things are like micro spacing for your hand rather than for your positioning. So this is your if you need to get rid of two cards and then a third one, that's a possibility. If you need more for these, that's a
Yep.
possibility. Okay, you can just kind of like nudge it slightly.
Yep. But this is again, this is one of your more reliable attacks. A lot of the time, if I have this in my hand, I just want to strike with it instead of boost it. So trade-offs.
Right.
And then our final projectile, special projectile. This one is pretty bad. It's above curve and it gets you a gauge. Those are both pretty appealing things.
Yeah.
This is like your fail case of your turn one mix up. You'd like to just throw out an unbeatable homing orb, but because you have an unbeatable homing orb, they have to respect you could just be playing magic shot.
Right. This looks like Tiger Shot.
It is, yeah. It's less damage, less economy reward, I think. Face up Tiger Shot, which isn't face up.
Right. And you have the force cost, which means that there will always be something in the discard even on turn one.
Yep. So this is not terrible. The thing that is sad about this card is if your opponent decides, okay, this Enchantress is playing Fire, this Enchantress is playing Dive, I'm going to EX Dive them. EX Dive beats this. It doesn't stun an EX.
It's not a mix-up. Like they guess wrong, but still right enough to beat the thing you really are playing.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and again, the reward is the gauge is nice. 2 damage is really not very much damage, especially if they already are expecting a homing orb and are just going to play block or focus.
Right.
So it's there. You'll use it, but you're not excited about it.
Okay.
So here are your.
Oh, and then the boost on this card.
Yes, the boost.
You mentioned briefly earlier.
This boost is annoying because this boost tells you, get out your notepad, write down what you're putting on the bottom of your deck. It might matter.
Right.
This is the nice thing about this boost is just kind of a better change cards action.
Right.
It's change cards that doesn't reveal options. That's definitely what it was intended to do. The fact that you control the order means you can do silly stuff like, oh, I had a game where I was playing Enchantress and I had boosted Rebirth. My opponent was playing a character with a slow projectile. They looked at my hand, they did the math, they said, okay, Rapid Beam is going to do 8 damage, I can strike with 8 guard. And then I wild swung the known Rapid Beam I had placed there.
So they know about what card you're putting you're putting on the bottom of your deck? Okay.
They do not. Only you do, which is why that worked, is they said, I cannot be beaten by a Rapid Beam unless it's wild swing, and what's the chances of that? Well,
right.
I knew it was there.
Right, yeah. The chances are incredibly high if they're 100 because you put it there.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's why you need to get your notepad out, is because sometimes it'll matter, but hopefully not. This is one of the flaws in this character. This is a Season 4 jank for you.
Do you tend to spend as many cards as possible and when you're playing this boost to try to get as much value out of it as you can?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I could see an argument like you have a specific card that you know you're going to want in your current hand, but yeah, you might as well just change cards is better when it's bigger.
Yep.
And I did talk about Fire Wave Boost. Okay, so let's go on to your other specials.
Sure.
This is your version of Focus. It doesn't have the can't be pushed or pulled. It does have more range. It doesn't have 7 effective guard. It only has 6, but it has guard instead of power. So that's why I'm calling it Focus. Armor instead of power.
Slow guardy thing with one
low
speed
damage.
and some kind of draw effect feels kind of focusy to me.
Yep. And yeah, this is your focus that you can use without being like, okay, great, I drew another card. I'm still at 1 card in hand.
Right.
This card is a lot of control over your hand size. On front side, you'll probably want to discard most of the time. I could see times on front side where you'd want to draw instead, but if I'm drawing if I like my current hand, I'll draw. And it's already relatively full. If my hand is empty or if I don't like it, I'll discard.
Right.
On backside, you probably just want to draw, I would assume.
Yeah,
so you might as well.
you don't have any particular need unless you're like trying to see more options from digging deeper in your
Yep,
deck,
there
I
is. Yeah,
guess.
there
Yeah,
are
I
reasons
guess.
you could, or
Yeah.
maybe like setting up they struck into you, and now you are preparing to land something like a homing orb on your
Right.
immediate next turn.
Oh,
Um,
that's true. I see what you mean.
yeah, they crossed out against it's Enchantress, which is already kind of a spicy decision, but they did it, and now you can set up your homing orb for next turn.
Right.
The other thing is if you overdraw and you want to boost something that's not going to fix that, so in that case you wouldn't want to draw the full value. Like, don't draw up the 10 and boost Fierce. It's just kind of wasteful.
Sure, sure.
But yeah, this card's reliable. This is kind of why I was saying you could just play slows, as you have an extra slow.
Yeah,
You have many extra slows.
you have a couple focuses in reserve.
Yep. And this boost, hit the opponent must discard 2, probably, is what this boost should mostly read. You can
Probably.
combine it with some other boosts to sometimes threaten the 3 power, but. And that's like an okay effect. It's not super exciting. So, this is a good. This is a. I can actually boost this on front side and draw a new hand boost, which some of the other boosts aren't. These two don't work for that. Because this is a you'll draw one card, you won't have a new hand, you draw something. This will make you either draw cards that you can't plan for yet, or wild swing because you've discarded down to 0 already.
Right. Yeah, the strike will have to be without something.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
But this card, you're at one card in hand and it's power up. Okay, this isn't a super exciting action, but I'll boost it. It does something. I get a new hand.
Right. And there's no reason for Enchantress's opponent to ever just discard one card. It's all or nothing.
I'm sure there's some weird exceed character, like Dan or something,
Right.
find a reason.
Oh man,
But
the Enchantress mirror
realistically,
match. The Enchantress mirror
yes, the
match is
Enchantress mirror match. Exactly.
yeah, that's what I want to see.
But yeah, in practice, they'll just discard 2.
Sure.
I suppose if they're blocking, it's a little more efficient to get the 3 power.
Right. Or if I mean, like there also might be circumstances where they just can't discard.
Yep.
And
that's when you'll actually get the 3 powers that you
sure.
can get in that situation.
Definitely. Okay.
And this is Flying Charge. This is a really reliable attack that sometimes beats slows, which is cool. Yep. It loses to dive, but yeah, it'll trade with Assault, it'll beat Spike.
Yep.
It'll beat it cross out at range 1, because you can close 3 instead of 2, like a lot of these effects might be.
Yep.
This is like your Tatsu, I guess.
Yeah, and you get to choose the range of the Tatsu. It's pretty safe. You would advocate for mostly playing this on defense then?
Not quite. There's some interactions. We're about to get to the main one.
Okay.
Here is when I said you have some big scary threats front side that you can just, or actually boost. Mind control. This is kind of nice because this is like the way that Spiral Orb and Flying Charges and attacks say you can empty your hand. This is a boost that says you can empty your hand.
Right.
It's not super high value. Sometimes I'll boost it and spend 1 force. Just like I have 2 cards in hand. Okay, discard something. I want a new hand.
Right.
Sometimes if their hand is low, this is pretty cool because they might have to show you every card in their hand, which means they might have to show you normals, which means now they have a liability.
Right. Okay, so this is kind of a punish tool in some ways in that case then. Like you're getting what you want to anyway because you're spending force, but if they have not a lot of hand size anyway, you're getting more information out of that and you're pressuring them kind of economically at the same time.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So this boost is okay. It's nothing to write home about because that's like we're coming up with reasons to use it. You don't need to come up with a reason to use Fierce or Light. They're just already good.
Yeah, well said. So before we go into the ultras, focus, dominant, basically title whirl style projectile most of the time when you want to play it, but it's kind of weird.
Most of the time when you want to play it. I would not say most of the time in general.
Right, definitely, because you just don't have the hand shape to allow it.
Yep.
Kind of weird scuffed tiger shot. Good stable projectile. Tatsu that sometimes beats slows.
Yep.
Okay.
This card is exciting on backside. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but this card's exciting on backside because you're in the corner. Now you have gone through range 7, and it's now your turn.
Right. Which
If they
which
struck into you.
which you can probably leverage pretty well with your stuff.
Yep. And okay, that's another good point actually. I just said you've gone to range 7 and it's now your turn. Well, this doesn't hit at range 7, so
Right.
that's awkward. This is another card like block. This is close. Just spend another force, go to range 6.
For each force spent, close 1. Okay, so you chest bump them once. You spend an extra force,
Yes.
and then you have fewer cards in your hand afterwards, so you advance fewer.
Yeah, you can control your
spaces.
positioning pretty finely on Exceed side with this.
Okay, interesting. The entire interaction is I spend up to 3 force. I'm here. I go 1, 2. I've got 4 cards left in hand. For example, I will go 1. I will advance 4. I don't want to advance 4. I want to advance 3. Okay. Instead, I spend 1, 2, 3, and then I do the rest of my advance.
Yep, exactly.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay.
And yep, and that's okay. Now we're going to get to what I was about to say about the altars. This is your big scary frontside threat. This is a really good reason for you to spend a bunch of extra force on flying charge. This boost.
Until they have the same number in hand as you, +1 power per card drawn this way.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'll break this down slightly. The opponent must discard until they have some number of cards in hand in you. The draw side is very, very situational.
Right.
So this is a card which has a 2 force cost on it, so you can pay that. You have lots of force. You can say, okay, I have this, I have flying charge, I have another ultra. I boost this, I have a hand of 4 cards, one of them is flying charge.
Right.
We're at range 1. What are you going to do to not get hit by flying charge with an empty hand?
Right.
So
Okay.
this is your big scary frontside threat. This is, I'm going to drop this down. You have to play a mix-up. If I win the mix-up, you discard your hand.
Right. I was about to say that this boost is expensive at 2 force cost, but then I remembered what character we're talking about.
Yeah,
And
that's upside for you. That makes it
yeah.
easier. Yep. So the play pattern for this boost is like, okay, you're pretty familiar with Ryu, right? That's one of the characters you mentioned as being the character you play.
Yeah, I know how Ryu plays.
We're at range 4. I'm Enchantress. I have a hand of. I'm just gonna draw some specific cards I want. You're Ryu. I'm Enchantress. I have one. Oh, I just drew the action reference. Okay, funny. Um, okay, it doesn't actually matter. We're at range 4. It's turn 1, I guess, because I'm feeling spicy. Boost critical attack. I'm discarding 2 cards. I'm discarding Rapid Beam and a Sweep. I can spend Salter for 1 force. Enchantress does that probably more often than anyone else in the game.
Oh, I didn't know that. It can be 1 or 2 force?
Yep.
Neat. Okay.
So I discarded this. This is telling you I'm just trying to say this is normal. You're not going to read me.
Right.
Okay. What do you do?
So the thing, I mean, not knowing the thing that we were just talking about, the flying charge. So at this range, I can Tatsu you, I can Hadoken you, I can run in, I can dive you. Dive is the only one. If what I'm specifically looking for is the answer to flying charge, I would dive in, or I would.
Yeah,
I guess I would tech this, one of the two.
Yes, teching this is very much one of the better answers. The other pretty good answer is just Way of the Warrior. Say, okay, hit me.
Right. Okay.
But if you don't have a boost in play, I can't actually flying charge you because my hand isn't big enough currently for me to pay the force to hit you if you don't help.
Right.
But I do have this mix-up. I have This could be, I'm expecting you to dive me. This
Right.
could be, I'm expecting you to Hadouken me. I'm expecting you to toss me. Anything that you do, there is a card in my set of specials that will trade with it.
Right. So
And if I trade with it, you go to 0, I go to 6, it's my turn.
yeah. Oh God. And so it doesn't have to be flying charge. It's just it's a good thing that that Ryu doesn't have the ability to just refill his hand for free when he hits 0 like you do.
Yep.
So
Yeah, if you do something really bad, you just like prep. I strike into you. Are you going to cross out or are you not? If
right,
you do cross out, okay, you're at 0 cards. You're at range 6. I have a full hand.
right,
If you don't cross out, okay, you're at 0 cards. I have a full hand.
right. So so sorry, I might have missed something then. Explain to me why you kind of comboed from flying charge into talking about this boost in particular. Is it just that
Um, Flying Charge is the most reliable because Flying Charge is a Speed 4 sweep. A Speed 4, range 1 to 4 sweep. It's not going to be guard broken by anything faster than it,
anything
except
faster than it?
specific specials. And it's not going to lose to cross. It's not going to lose to slows. It's going to hit you. It's your most. It's the attack that you don't actually. You don't have to be at a specific range. Like
Right.
these were what I kept. These were at range 4, but at range
Right.
1, I would just keep Flying Charge.
And so I'm playing around the flying charge because that is the obvious threat, but that's not enough. You're saying because these things work just as well. This boost doesn't say hit with flying charge and then I discard my hand. It's hit with
Yeah,
anything.
these are both 4 specials, so I kept 2 of them. Either one will empty my hand.
Right.
At range 1, I would keep Flying Charge because at range 1, if I Flying Charge you, you're getting hit almost
Right.
definitely.
And so the other part of the reason that flying charge is important is that
Yes, Flying Charge gives you the flexibility to empty your hand as well.
And in order for this to actually be as devastating as it can be, you need an empty hand. That makes sense. Okay, gotcha. Sorry, I had to do a lot of Enchantress math to.
Yeah,
to
I jumped
come to that
around a
conclusion.
little bit there. Understandable.
No, it makes sense though. It's just a very odd idea.
So, yeah, this is, and then the other thing I could just do is I could just play like fast slow. Like, okay, my hand is 1 card in hand this time. Do you think it's grass? Do you think it's focus?
Right.
Either way, you're going down to 0 if you lose. So,
Right. Yeah.
This is your big scary threat. It has answers. It has a lot of answers. Tech it, boost. Those are the best ones, probably. Because if you boost, Enchantress might lose the mix-up. Enchantress might just, like, again, Way of the Warrior. If you boost Way of the Warrior, now you can cross, and you will actually beat everything I do at this range.
Right. Yeah, I mean, her stats aren't crazy enough to be able to keep up with a boost of that caliber, and you can't really. If we're talking about Ryu, I'm looking at your kit, and you don't have the boosts to sustain that kind of pressure on me.
Yep.
Okay.
So Ryu, yeah. So yeah, tech that card. Don't get hit by it. Whatever you do, don't get hit by it because that's a lot of value for Enchantress.
Definitely, yeah.
And okay, now we can talk about the actual attack, probably. Or
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think you're going to come to this later, but that is something that is specifically useful on Frontside because on Backside, you make the opponent draw cards, and you want to play that as an attack.
Yes, these are your 2 big scary. This is on Frontside, or sorry, these are your 2 big. This is what you lose when you exceed. This is not going to hit anymore. This is no longer a threat.
Right.
You lose 2 armor on Firewave, but Firewave is a really good card. Firewave without the armor is completely acceptable.
Yeah, that's still just fine. Okay, but so these are the things that Frontside has as an advantage over the exceed effect.
Yeah, these and of course the going down to 0 at the end of a strike. Just every way of doing that is a little better on Frontside.
Right.
But these are the specific interactions you're looking at Frontside.
But on Backside, I don't need to go down to 0 at the end of every strike. So maybe that's not as much of an advantage.
Yep.
Okay.
So the attack side of this Ultra on Frontside, sometimes this will be again. This is a speed 4 sweep. On Frontside, sometimes it'll be a speed 4 sweep with enough range. On Backside, it'll always be a speed 4 sweep with enough range.
With yes range, pretty much.
Yep.
Okay.
And on Frontside, this card mostly doesn't exist on front. This attack does not exist on Frontside because it's just not going to do that much damage.
Sure.
You don't have that much ability to get to range 8 on Frontside either. Like, you can take the move action, but then you just spent your hand, so either you're holding Rapid Beam and you have no other cards, or you are hoping you're drawing Rapid Beam.
Right, and I can't hold Rapid Beam and then get. So then I'm doing 4 damage. I'm doing a really expensive 4 damage at range 8
Yep.
because there's nothing else to make that stronger.
Yep. So these attacks. That's why, again, we were just saying you need to exceed for these to be attacks mostly.
Yeah,
Shattering
definitely.
Stream a little more often, good on front side, but if you're on front side, you could just use the boost. It's like, yeah.
Right. All right. That makes sense.
And the boost on Dark Strafe, this is a little bit more flexible than a move action on front side in particular, because on front side, if I have 4 cards in my hand, I have to move 4 spaces if I want a new hand. If I have Dark Strafe, I can go anywhere and draw a new
Right.
hand.
I could move if you desperately needed to. You could move 0 and then discard 3 cards, and it would be a very odd
Yep,
way to do
you
it. But
could. It would be really
yeah,
weird, but you
yeah.
could do it.
That's what I would do if I was only paying attention to the part where you told me to empty my hand and forgot about the get value out of it.
Yep.
Right.
So that's a pretty fast overview of the attacks, and then on front side in particular, backside.
Right.
Ultras are online. We can play EXs reliably instead of unreliably. We can have our techs when we need them. We can play lights and fierces when we need them. And we're never going to be like, okay, I'm down to 1 card in my hand and it's a focus. What do I do with this?
Right. What you do with it is whatever you want, basically, and then you get up to 6 cards again at the end of the or 7 at the end of the turn.
Well, not quite. Because that works for front side too, sort of. Well, the thing is, you're never going to be in that situation in the first place. You're never going to say, I played my minigame wrong and I'm stuck with an awkward hand.
Right.
You just don't have to play the minigame anymore.
Right. I gotcha.
So, yeah. Tech gets better. All these boosts get better. Parry in particular is a nice one because your opponent has threats you want to parry. Okay, you can parry them.
Right.
6 times.
Yeah, and you don't have to hope that you got them. You can hold it. You can just hang out until it's until they're threatening the thing that you're afraid of.
Yep.
Okay.
And then this is another thing about your low damage deck. You don't have like an overhead. You can have problems just actually killing people.
An overhead as in spike, right? Like an ignore armor, ignore guard kind of
sorry.
thing. Yep.
As in the boost overhead. As in
Okay. So
anything that ignores armor.
Ignore
anything
armor,
that
no strike.
Yeah, anything that ignores armor.
Right.
If your opponent has a lot of armor, you have low damage, you probably don't want to trade with them. Just parry their focuses, parry their armored option, parry their block even. I like parrying block as Enchantress. It's probably worse than parrying focus, but sometimes you already parried the focus and you have another parry, so.
Okay, and so my damage is low enough across my kit that if they happen to block this or this at the
you're
wrong
sad.
time,
You're quite sad.
Yeah, and I look at the rest of my, maybe not even the rest of my hand, like the rest of my deck in the position I'm at and say, like, do I have enough damage to kill this guy?
Yeah, I think to get to that bad of a situation, you've made mistakes up to that point, but like you do have to be aware of it. You have to be thinking, how do I actually get enough damage to win the game?
Right. Where is my damage coming from, if not the thing they just blocked? Okay.
Yep. That one's less about the force expenditure and more about just like you don't win for free a bunch of strikes in a row and exceed. You trade. You play the game.
Yeah.
And you need to deal damage to win. And none of your boosts. 2 of your boosts say power, but both of them kind of lie about it.
Yeah, this is actually a really scary discard effect. This is actually a much smaller discard effect.
Yep. And yeah, you need damage to win the game. You have parry, they have focus and block. At least they possibly have other things. Go ahead and parry those.
Right. And you don't have a single card that is so centralizing to your game plan the way that when we were talking about Dan
Light Taunt.
And if they have something that actually consistently cleanly beats Legendary Taunt, maybe parry that option. You don't have something like that is like, oh, this is my card, I need to play this card. They have one thing that beats it, I got to get rid of it.
Yep, you don't have anything like that, really.
Okay.
So, yeah. that's just one of the things you can do with beer. Again, you have more copies of your neutral tool, so just use them, get incremental value on
Right.
backside.
Just play neutral once you can.
Yep. So
But sorry,
let's talk about the alter.
before we discuss the kit, kind of the second time through on Exceed side, um, what maybe best case, worst case scenario? How long in the game should I be spending exceeding, or sorry, should I be spending on the exceed side rather? Like, like is it approximately half the game, or like early game, late game, or is it? And I'm because I'm not necessarily trying to rush it because I'm trying to time it with everything else. Like, how
Yeah,
long should I be expecting to be in exceed mode?
that's going to vary game to game. It's you want to do it. You want to do it, particularly when you have the gauge to play these. You want to do it if you like really need reliable techs and stuff. Um, you could say probably like half the game. Just that's a complete guess. Just like
Okay.
it's going to take you a while to get there. You might as well do it once you get there.
It's not like
would
Mole
vary.
Knight. It's not like Mole Knight, for example, where he's exceeded and the game is effectively over because it's going to be over in like 3 strikes.
Nope, not at all. You're going
Okay.
to spend a nice. Enchantress plays pretty long games in terms of number of strikes because you're a zoner. You do low damage. You're
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, if you have like a really fast early game, you could just land magic shot twice in your first hand
Right.
and just be exceeded and have dealt 4 damage. So yeah, it varies.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Continue with the kit breakdown, please.
So let's talk about the altars because now they exist.
Right.
This is 6 damage. It's always going to hit. It's probably never going to get stunned.
Oh, not at 4 speed.
Yep.
Yeah, stuff that hits 6 at 4 speed. I
It's
mean,
rare.
we're talking about Ryu. Like, I got my EX
Yeah,
donkey kick ready
Ultras.
to go. Yeah, or an Ultra.
Yep.
Okay.
And this is on backside. This is a very long range attack. This doesn't have to be afraid of the X donkey kick because you can just play it at range 5 and it'll probably still hit.
And you can spend more force to get away than the person threatening that attack can keep up with. You just get away from them and do the big move.
Yep. This card likes power because you're investing 3 gauge into it. It deals 6 damage. That's kind of low for an ultra. That's quite low for an ultra.
Yeah.
And then if it has power, it also some guarded projectiles can get up to 6. It's pretty rare. Most guarded projectiles go to 5, but you know they can always boost to just put power on this because it's reliable.
Right, and in melee that means it beats focus and sweep.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense. Oh, and you can't cross out. Like
you can't cross out. It's gonna hit you.
Yeah. I mean the adage that D says sometimes is that power is a threat that speed confirms. That might
and this
that
has
might be
enough
true.
Speed and range to confirm the threat.
Yeah, and really, range is what's confirming the threat.
Yep.
In this case, okay, that makes sense.
And this is your Ultra, and unfortunately, this one's still kind of niche because 5 to 8 is a really bad range band. It turns out. Yeah. You are in the literal corner, and they are at this range. If they have a fast dive, this doesn't automatically hit them.
Right. It still doesn't work. I mean, it's a huge punish when it does. Right. This is hitting me for like 12.
11. Yeah,
11. Yeah. I can do math.
Well, it's probably 10 to be honest. I did it wrong too because you're spending a card to play it, but you know, it's hitting for a lot. It's probably not hitting.
Right. Okay. So in a situation where they are all of their, I've successfully ran away from them for long enough that all of their movement options are down, or they've teched critical attack already. They don't have a dive anymore. Maybe I can make it happen, but it's not nearly as free to use as Shattering Scream is.
Yeah. Or probably you drew EX of it on backside. That solves a lot of its problems. You're not getting a damage out of the EX. That feels a little bad, but you're still actually hitting. You're getting in another sense, you're getting 10 damage out of it because you're hitting instead of not hitting.
Right, so, yeah. The difference between 10 and 11 sounds bad for 10, but the difference between 10 and 0 sounds pretty good for 10.
Yep. Yeah. So, yeah. They have to respect it, obviously. That's the other thing. You don't have, you're not new with Retreat 2 if you're at range 4 or 5 strike or whatever. You're not Lychee, Retreat 2 and strike. You're not Ryu, Move 2 and strike.
Right.
The only way you're going to catch them by surprise by what range you're at is you're going to play Flying Charge. Or maybe Fire Wave on their turn.
Otherwise, I you're over here and we're here, and I go, okay, I spend my entire hand, I go over, except for one card, and I go over here, and they're thinking, huh, I wonder what that card is.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah,
So yeah, they do have to not get hit by it. The onus is on them, but they will do something that makes that true.
totally.
Okay. So yeah, flying charge gets a lot better on backside because on front side, dodging is a lot dicier. Dodging might require you to spend gauge. You might just not be able to dodge.
Right.
On backside, you're going to dodge. If
You'll
if
consistently
you're
be
not
able
going
to
into the corner, you're going to
right.
dodge.
You'll consistently be able to get out of the way with your hand size because of the after effect.
Yep.
Yeah.
You do lose this interaction, which is again really nice, but
Right.
this card is good. This card is solid. This is a Tatsu that beats slows on backside.
Yep.
So cool. This card doesn't change very much. This is just a solid card on both sides.
Am I more likely to be using the draw effect though?
Yeah, because like again, you don't have any reason to discard except like situational things.
Yeah.
But but this card kind of is a draw too on front side, so it really doesn't feel very different.
Right.
This card, again, we talked about already. You lose to 2 armor. This card doesn't need 2 armor. This card's great.
It's already fine. It just trades a little bit worse.
This card is force. You could use ground break, but on Exceed side, you're more likely to be in that situation I described. Where like, oh wait, they can just choose to move 1, take 1 damage, and now they kill you.
Right.
Because your health is lower because you're late game.
It's late game, sure.
And then this boost, this is better CC still. You're more likely to I think you're more likely to use it on backside, just because on front side CC is less appealing because you can empty your hand and get a CC
and get and do something else at the same time.
Yep.
Right.
And you don't need gauge as much anymore because you got your thing. You still need gauge for the ultras, but like if these cost 7 because you need 4 and then 3, now they cost 3.
Yep.
So Magic Shot is fine. I think there is probably some value to holding EX Magic Shot, so you have like instead of the homing orb, you have a worse homing orb as a range 6.
Right.
Don't assault me option. But it's not something I'm thinking about too much.
Okay, that makes sense. And the boosts that you sort of glossed over from these cards don't really have any different interactions on backside compared to front side.
Yeah, you'll draw with this one more often because maybe you need 1 point of range to make sure your Shattering Scream always hit the cross or something. This one, you don't ever need to use it to get a new hand, so you'll just use it when you actually want to use it. But pretty similar.
Yep. Okay. So you're in general, it sounds like you're playing more of your attacks as attacks on Exceed side, with the exception of Homing Orb and
you get your ultras now as attacks.
Right.
You lose Homing Orb.
Right.
Attack wise.
And I can also play Fierce and Light, as you said. So I a lot more of my kit opens up, but I do lose a couple of important options from front side.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually what I was about to talk about. Like stepping back, what did we get? What did we lose? We got 3 runs through our deck. We hopefully got out of an awkward hand if we needed to.
Yep.
Those are great. We lose Homing Orb. We lose Critical Attack. We lose the funny block. We lose Empty Your Hand with Spiral Orb, because that's actually kind of a big deal. When you play Spiral Orb on front side, you are seeing 6 new options. When you play Spiral Orb on back side, you're seeing 3 new options.
Right.
But it does its job in either case. And Fire Wave is worse, but still good. So these are the big ones. This cleanup effect is the big one. But the rest of our kit, we gained. We got ultras. We have better set play. We have better neutral. Flying charge gets a lot better, and we can't play our mini game wrong.
Right. So why does the cleanup trigger? Like I understand why the cleanup trigger is important on front side. Like being able to strike into a card draw is very important. But
yeah, why do you need to draw during a strike if you can just draw normally?
I misread this then on this. So I can't do it while striking. That does
you have.
That's right. That's very different. Okay.
Yeah, if you don't like your hand, you either need to take the change cards option, which feels a little bad because like you could be doing anything else and getting the same draw.
Right.
or you need to find a way to spend the force. And like you might not have a way to spend the force. You might just be stuck with cards that you don't really want in your hand.
Right. And even if I'm boosting or something, like let's say I mostly like my hand and I just want to make it a little bit better. I boost and then I get, my boost says +2 power from Fierce, and also I draw this many cards because it's at the end of my turn I drew. But uh, it cannot be strike and do that the way that it can on Frontside.
Yep.
Okay, so does that change on its own sort of change me from a rush down character into a more patient zoner type character?
Yep. 100%.
Okay, that's interesting. Like I've talked to so D about Guile, for example, going from front side to big hand Guile, where suddenly I've ramped up into a rushdown character. This is maybe the first character that I've talked about that sort of does the opposite, where you're rushing, and then suddenly you hit the brakes, and that's what's scary for your opponent.
Yep.
Wild. All right, that's very weird.
So, yeah, I prepared. I imagine you're going to ask me about counterplay and counterplay, so I have my answer ready for that. But that's
Yeah.
kind of my overview done. So I'm ready for questions.
All right, yeah. I feel like the big one is just getting into that mindset. So let's see. So we talked about the strategy. We talked about the kit. Preferred range. It seems like just long, right? Like not a
Yep.
particular melee character, but you play neutral with what you've got, and on front side you're not really in
Um,
control of a lot of that stuff.
yeah, in front side, you're adapting to your hand. You need to be you look at your hand and you say, where do I want to stand with this hand? On
Right,
backside, you have a lot more flexibility. You want to be at long ranges because these are good at long ranges. On front side, there is actually, if you get too far away, your opponent, like you're no longer putting pressure on your opponent's hand. They can just draw.
right. They
Like
can
if
just
you're at
hang
range
out
7
there.
on front side, you can't hit them anymore because you are not ready to play these.
Right, definitely. Um, Let me hang on. At something you said at the very beginning, it's come up, but we didn't talk about it explicitly. Is where my gauge is coming from. So magic shot,
Yes.
uh,
Magic shot and reliable shapes.
yeah, consistent card chips. I don't have any boosts that put stuff in gauge, do I?
You do not. Nope.
Okay, so just the fact that I'm playing a lot of strikes on front side because I'm rushing them down. The majority of my strikes are going to hit, even if they're not going to do that much damage. I'm getting gauge from that. I'm getting extra from magic shot. I'm going to build the gauge, but I'm not generating it like crazy, like a season 6
No,
character
you
would.
have to work for your 4 gauge. You have to hit them probably
Right,
3 times. Let's say one of them is a magic shot.
right,
Um,
and then hit them, and then
yeah, and then you need
hit them
three
even
more.
more. Yeah. Okay. So this is actually a pretty steep cost that I'm trying to work toward here, and that probably means that really I'm realistically probably playing one of these ultras per game, right?
Probably. You might get to 2, but yeah, probably one.
Okay. Um, that's good to know
Um,
because I'm not trying to save to hit both or something like that.
yeah, I mean, so the trade the opposite side of that is again, your damage is really low. You could land 4 magic shots. You could be at 8 gauge and have dealt 8 damage. There is a non-zero chance that you will get 10 gauge in the course of the game and be able to hit with multiple ultras, but you don't
Okay.
have to. Yeah, it's all pretty flexible. You have to judge how the game is going because the opposite game where you hit with 4 sweeps and you still have more sweeps in your deck, you don't need to hit with. Yeah,
Right. Okay. Um, but the lower damage in general makes for, as you said, more strikes and more interactions. That means there's more opportunities for gauge, but it also means that I might need to use more gauge over the course of the game. That makes sense.
yep,
Um, I feel like a lot of the sort of more general questions about economy and force costs that I would ask of any other character do not apply to Enchantress. Any particular, like, I'm looking for like breakpoints and stuff. I see 4 4 4 4. None of these are like going to hit a magic number with Fierce.
nope.
Um, uh,
This 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 can't lose to EX dive anymore. That's about it.
okay, that's a fair point. For the two damage not being enough to break that.
Yeah,
That
two
makes
damage
sense.
is rare in Exceed because losing to EXs when you hit them first feels
Right.
kind of bad.
Yeah, it's odd. Um,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, no, that all makes sense. I think, yeah. In that case, if you're ready to move on to counterplay, like this is all the Enchantress stuff. Uh, I've taken my notes. I'm playing Enchantress. I've got your guide that I have open on YouTube right next to me, and I'm referring to it so I remember all of this weird jank that she has. My opponent knows all the weird jank already. They're doing stuff to counter it. What are they doing? And I, as the Enchantress player, how am I trying to diffuse what they're doing so that I can play my game?
Yep. So the first thing you want to do, you're playing against Frontside Enchantress first off, you want to, if you can, get into her head. She's doing stuff, it looks weird. Like, she move actions 1. Why did she move there? What's in her hand that is making her choose to move there? Because there is a plan. She's not just going there because it's a range that she likes. She needs a
Right.
very concrete plan about why she's
Right.
standing where she's standing.
She's looking for homing orb. She's setting up flying charge. She's got a boost ready to play that's going to do something weird to you.
Yep. So that's that's a mindset you should be playing against her, is like, why did she do what she did? Because there should be a reason.
And that reason, it sounds like, is because her cards are like quite specific. It's kind of telegraphed.
It can be, yeah. Though, like, again, you draw a hand of 6 cards. Sometimes you have an EX. That's like, if a character walks range 3, you're thinking about EX Assault. Even though Enchantress can't hold EX Assault, you're still thinking about EX Assault because maybe she drew it. Why is she at range 3 specifically?
It's still a threat, right? And I feel like the telegraphing is obfuscated at some level by layers and layers of jank and confusion and not knowing the character. And that's probably to your advantage. I mean, the fact that this is sort of an off meta pick, you probably can just knowledge check some people. But we're talking about, like, no, my opponent has labbed the matchup. They know what they're doing against Enchantress, and we're not trying to rely on this character not being familiar to most people. So they're looking for what I'm playing whenever I play it. They understand why it's happening. And
I mean, to be fair, like, the Fog of War is real and important. I could not just play against an Enchantress and say, like, oh, she moved to range 3 because she wants to do exactly, like, Homing Orb. Like, I could be suspicious, but Homing Orb specifically, if you're at range 4 and you move to range 3, Homing Orb has gone from hitting to hitting.
Right. Yeah.
Or not hitting to not hitting.
Right. Yeah. That doesn't actually change the interactions that much.
So, yeah, but Homing Orb is a big one. Be aware of when Homing Orb is being threatened against you, because if you are not expecting a Homing Orb, that probably means you lose to Homing Orb if it hits you.
Yep.
Make her have the right answers, Frontside, because her deck order is unreliable. You can boost stats. She needs to have drawn the answers to your stats, or else she needs to come up with something creative. This critical attack thing, she can just say, like, we're playing a mix-up, but if you have answers in your hand, you can diffuse the mix-up, and then she needs to...
Right. And this
now she has 1 card in hand, and she needs to figure out what she's doing.
And this is one of her few really, really big scary threats on all of Frontside. So I can, as her opponent, I can kind of plan for this moment and know how to diffuse it ahead of time if I have the cards.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so that played for value, Frontside Enchantress, like, does not have good deltas. She has Spiral Orb, which again is a slow.
Right.
She has Fire Wave, which is a decent slow. But, like, she's going to be throwing attacks at you that don't do all that much. She doesn't have access to that much power boost. She just don't get into a bad situation and outvalue her is the big one.
Right. Which
don't get zoned out.
With her kit is not that hard to do.
Yep. Don't get zoned out, because, yeah, she is a zoner. She's not a particularly punishing zoner if you get to range on Frontside. The worst she can do to you is, like, okay, I'm going to get some gauge and not have to care about it. I'm going to get some damage, some pretty low damage, because this is mostly reliable rather than threatening.
Right, but you're by doing that, when she does that to you, you're giving her the opportunity to flip and have much and be able to play for value much more effectively later.
Yep. Use, like you were saying about, like, oh, if I have, like, you were saying this as an example of, like, I can't beat this card, but, like, if you just have, like, EX kick, donkey kick.
Yes.
Your attacks are better than her attacks, probably.
Yeah.
So play your good attacks, force her to be like, okay, I'm trading down against this EX donkey kick, or not EX donkey kick in this case, because she can't even trade against the EX.
Right.
Reading, she's potentially going to do some spooky reading stuff, especially on backside, because she can just like parry focus. Okay, I missed. Now you have to do something. And now I'll parry focus again. Parry focus again. Parry focus again. Parry focus again.
Right.
5 times, 6 times.
I have more parries than you have copies of reading.
Yep.
Yeah.
But in return, again, sometimes she puts herself pretty vulnerable to reading. So
Yep.
if you need to go for Hail Mary reading, you can pick your time that's
Yep.
going to be less of a Hail Mary than usual.
Definitely. Is it common then for talking about playing for value? Is it common then for Enchantress to exceed at a life deficit because against a good opponent because your opponent has been making you accept difficult trades all game?
Yes.
Okay.
And even once you're exceeded, you still might have to. You still have. You have a lot of stat boosts. You do not have a high density of stat boosts. You
Yeah.
still have to.
Yeah, you can play them and you should play them because you're going to see them again, but you don't have Swift Destruction, right? You don't have a
Yeah.
+4 speed boost. You have many copies of a +2 speed boost that you should have and or that you should play.
Yep.
Okay.
Something Enchantress can do, which like this is again kind of to counter it. You just be aware that she can do it and play Exceed well. Enchantress can waste your time. Enchantress. We talked about a lot about like, oh, you have 90 force in your deck, you need to win, or 96, 90, 98, whatever.
Right.
But I think she can do things where she's like, okay, I'll move one. I'll move one. I'll move one. Move one. I think if you are playing well, you can punish that. You can be boosting. You can, if you set up a hard to break boost state on, especially on front side, she's probably losing the strike. She doesn't have a great way to get out of that situation.
Right.
But if she's wasting your time and you're like getting drawn into it, you could actually be the one decking out. It could happen. It's not that crazy because her damage is slow. She has more cards than you.
Yeah, and she has she can reshuffle more than you can.
Yep. So she can parry you 6 times and make you change cards a bunch.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So the pressure is on you as her opponent to use your options efficiently so that she doesn't put you on a timer because her timer is longer than yours.
Yes, but the pressure is also on her to use her options efficiently so she doesn't put herself on a timer because she can blow through her deck.
Right.
Both of you need to be aware of the forces.
Her timer ticks faster, but there's more numbers on it, right? Like it's a longer timer, but it's like a this might be a reference only for me. It's like the clock in Super Mario World, right? It goes down way faster than a real timer would.
Yeah, so like she has control over how fast it goes down, and you have control over how fast it goes down because you can say, "Okay, Enchantress, do something, or I'm going to set up. I have better boosts and attacks than you. I'm going to set up something and hit you with it.
Right.
Stop me." And she, except for critical attack, she mostly doesn't get to say that. You're the one who has. She's the one who has to stop you.
Right. Yeah. She's playing answers until she can flip. And her questions that she's asking are not actually that difficult to answer most of the time.
Yep. So like, if you get drawn into wasting a bunch of time, that favors her.
Mm-hmm.
But you can stop her from wasting a bunch of your time because you can. She has force her to not waste either of your time.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
No, that does make sense. Okay.
So yeah, that's counterplay mostly.
Okay. And then when she's flipped over, and she actually has those threats online, it sounds like the stuff that you're like, you're looking for specific, different specific options as her opponent, but the actual, the value trade is still a thing. The deck pressure is still a thing. Like the actual broad strokes of counterplay don't actually change that much when she's flipped.
Yep, the main thing is once she's flipped, she gets a lot more ability to zone you and a lot more reward for zoning you. Because on front side, you're at range 6. You're at range 6. I hit with Fire Wave. Okay, you're at range 8. Well, I critical attacked you, strike you. You have 2 cards in hand. Sounds like a great time to prep. What's Enchantress going to do? Run at me?
Right.
Probably, but she has to.
Right.
On backside,
that's
here, I hit you with Fire Wave. Now you need to solve this because this is a threat.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Got it.
On backside, yeah, she can zone you more.
All right, that makes sense. Okay, and then I think the last question I tend to ask, we've got an aspiring Enchantress player who has been making his way through the roster and has come up with a few characters that they like. Or we've got an Enchantress main who's just watching this video to brush up on some of the hidden tech, and they're looking for other characters like Enchantress. Who would you recommend?
Um, yep. So mostly not too surprising given what we've already been talking about. She's a zoner. She plays like other. She doesn't play like a new zoner. She doesn't play like you get to range and you immediately need to solve the problem or you lose. She plays like I don't know, like a Rachel. She's comfortable at range. She's more comfortable at range than you are. You need
Okay.
to not not give her a bunch of free value by being at range.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, other zoners. We've talked about Dan a lot. If
Yep.
you like the hand manipulation, Frontside Enchantress is all about hand manipulation.
Yep. Man, if only there was a Dan guide out there somewhere on YouTube that you could watch to learn more about Dan. But there's not, so don't go looking for it.
Um, on backside, you don't get to do the Exceed Guile. I have 12 cards in my hand. I'm playing EXs every strike. You can't be that spicy, but you do get to do. I have 7 cards in my hand, all whiz.
All the time, yeah.
So I'll have lots of options. Like, this is a little more of a stretch, obviously, but like, like you're Gold Lewis or something. You just have options.
Right. Yeah. If you like to have a lot of cards, there are characters in Exceed who have a lot of cards. But I mean, like this question was almost unanswerable from the start because the premise of this lesson when we started out was, Rose, please,
Yeah,
God, teach me about this weird character. I don't
Enchantress,
understand what's
pretty
going on.
unique.
Yeah,
Pretty unique character.
she's very weird. There's not a lot like her. But that
Um,
that is a
that itself is actually a similarity, though.
absolutely.
He,
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
go on.
No, no, please.
Oh, yeah, just going to talk about some themes. From season 4, which is a season which is known for having quite a bit of jank. If you like
Yep.
jank, this is your card pool.
Yeah.
She is one of the more. I'm not going to make a comparative list of jankness. She is jank. She is definitely a season 4 character.
Right. She's very strange. And also, like as we discussed earlier in the lesson, she's kind of off meta. She's weird. She
Yep.
doesn't get play a lot, maybe because she's complicated, maybe because she's like it is harder to access the full scope of her power than it would be to access
Yeah, this
Bang's
is something
power.
D says. Oh, that's not a good example because Bang is another character which is very high skill cap.
That's true.
But this is something D says a lot. Resource decisions are like really interesting. They're really deep.
Yep.
Enchantress makes a lot of resource decisions, shockingly. Like, they're very different resource decisions than a Season 5 character who's super resource limited makes.
Right.
But you still have to say, like, okay, I'm Frontside, I am playing my Spiral Orb, I'm discarding down. Do I discard to 0 cards and draw a new hand immediately? It's about to be my turn. Maybe I discard to 1 card and strike. Maybe I discard to 2 cards and I reading strike. Maybe you're constantly making resource decisions. They're not ones where you're starved for resources, but there's room to optimize.
Right. And in high level exceed play, like resource decisions are some of the most difficult things to like absolutely get down perfectly, right? Like that
Yep,
that's where a lot
that's
of
why I say I think there's a lot of room to
that's
develop
where
her.
and that's where a lot of the skill expression in Exceed comes from. That like playing cards, I can't play Donkey Kick better than somebody else can play Donkey Kick beyond a certain point. But the sort of micro decisions of how to spend resources have a huge amount of overhead in them that gives them a lot of room to
Yep.
learn them and get better and better and better at them with a very, very high limit.
Yep. And I think once you're exceeded, you have that, like, you have set play. Your set play is not, like, explosive. You don't have slap down a Way of the Warrior or Swift Destruction, answer it. You have inevitability. That's not the right word because you don't actually have inevitability. You have pressure on the opponent. You have, I can just keep playing neutral. And I don't have particularly great neutral tools, but I have a set of neutral tools that are very different than you do because the way my character functions.
Right. So if you're looking for a character who is a little bit hard to understand, a little bit hard to play, but then once you've figured out how to play her, there's still a lot of room above that to keep learning and keep like refining and getting better. It's not a situation where like this character is really hard to understand. Okay, I've got it. Now they're
Yep.
solved. Now I understand how to play them. Like you can keep learning Enchantress for a very long time.
Yep. So yeah, that's yeah. Looking for reasons. You like hand manipulation, Enchantress does hand manipulation. Looking at a hand of 6 cards, making a game plan. I think that's pretty skill testing and fun.
Yep.
Um, Big dumb force expenditures. Like not everything about Enchantress has to be cerebral. Sometimes you just like, okay, I move 6, I draw a new hand. It's
Right.
funny. You don't get to say that very often in this game. I draw 6. I move 6. I draw 6.
Right. Yeah. That
Um,
that is not common.
Discard your hand, please. That's also a pretty rare one. Usually you have
Yep.
to like land a expensive grappler alt. I'm
Yep.
not good enough to land an expensive grappler alt. I can land critical attack though.
Yeah. Critical attack seems okay. You got some easy to confirm cards. I just love the idea of being like, oh man, two two force ultra boost. That's too
Yeah, yeah,
expensive. Two force ultra boost to like, oh man, sign me up. That sounds great.
yep. I think the fact that you exceeding is not a strict upgrade is an interesting play experience. Like that's part of the appeal of overdrives. But
Yep.
like and season 2 sort of as well.
Yeah.
This is she has pretty light shades of this because season 2 obviously you are Lucia, you exceed, you are going from this fast evasive character to I'm just going to hit you for like 8 damage,
Right. And
and also I'm
it's a
going to burn out
completely
all my
different
gauge.
it's a completely different character, whereas Enchantress is still mostly the same, but has kind of a different comfort zone and has different goals in her exceed mode.
Yep. So yeah, as opposed to someone who just like I exceed, I'm better at what I do. I exceed, I'm better at a different thing that's like related, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's making you make more interesting decisions, which sounds like a lot of fun.
Yep.
All right. All right. Well, I think that's about everything then. Rose, thank you again. This has been wonderful. I'm really looking forward to giving Enchantress another look and see if I can make any sense of her with your help. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, really, really appreciate it. And everybody watching, thank you as well. I hope that your understanding of Enchantress goes a little bit more smoothly than mine. And I will see everybody for the next one. Bye.
Take care.